introducing Liz Rodwell.
Okay, I got this. Okay, thank you. And for those of you online, this is a beautiful space that Pros has. So I hope you can come down and see it sometime. They have ceiling clouds. I love this. Okay, so bear with me a little bit. I'm gonna have to be like, okay, next slide repeatedly. But I have a lot to talk about because this is absolutely my favorite topic currently. I am kind of obsessed. So, okay, if we go to the next slide, I did an introduction of myself, which I added at the last minute because I was like, if we just go into this, some people are gonna be like, who? So yes, I am actually contractually obligated to tell you that I wrote a book and that you should buy it. So I've checked that off now. That's the book cover, and indeed, you can find it places where there are books. So yeah, I will sign any copy you want. I have done my hustling for the night. But yes, I am at the University of Houston. I am based on the tech campus we're building in Sugar Land, although I go back and forth like all UH people quite a bit. And I'm in the digital media program. We are now part of the College of Engineering, which is pretty cool. It allows me to claim engineering by proxy a little bit. I'm also the founding director of the UX Lab. That's our URL. You can find us. You're welcome to work with us. We have a really cool lab, and we're always looking for partners. So do connect with us, especially if you're like, you know what, I could use a lab, and my group doesn't have its own lab with like a control room and an observation room and all of that. So yeah, my degrees are actually in anthropology and media studies. Like a lot of people have been in UX for a while. I didn't study UX in school because there really wasn't UX to study in school. There was human-computer interaction within computer science, but I was really sort of removed from that. So I'm a social scientist, and that connects to this, my interest that I will talk about. So, okay, next one. Good, we can get away from the self-promotion slide. All right, so I'm gonna start with definitions. Like, what is conversational AI? Why should you care if you haven't heard about this already? And why, as UX professionals, should we be getting involved in this? So to briefly define it, conversational AI are systems that are designed to talk to you, to communicate in some way. And they've been around since the 1960s. So this is not actually brand shiny new technology, although it's been getting a lot of hype recently. I'll show you Eliza, the first chatbot, momentarily. So it's called by many names, and there are many subtypes. So I'm gonna get into those really quickly. That'll be my first foray in here. I will start with what the subgenres of conversational AI are. Okay, next one. I'm gonna keep you busy, sorry. Okay, so this is slide 1 of 2 because, believe it or not, there are 4 categories. So we have our bots. Those are our chat bots, the things that pop up on nearly every website these days and offer to help you. They often act as a first line of defense for companies who are routing customer service requests, or well, they're trying to solve the easy ones before they reach a human and take up manpower. So yeah, these are pretty ubiquitous these days. But there are some more fun ones. Eliza, of course, I mentioned. I just alphabetized these. I don't know. Eliza, I'll show you. You can play with Eliza still online. Was an original one. We have voice assistants, of course, which people love to hate. So we have Alexa. I'm going to set somebody's off at home, I'm sure. Google, Siri. We had Cortana, RIP. And there are others that are less mainstream. Embodied conversational agents are essentially chatbots with a voice user interface and an avatar. So Replica is a great example of that. I recently wrote a paper about people forming relationships with Replica with a colleague of mine. And I'm doing a research project in Japan, working at a place that has developed their own embodied conversational agent as well, that's based on GPT. Okay, so that transitions us into the next one. What is getting the hype these days? So, wait, was there one before that, or am I insane? No, I'm insane. Okay, well, in my imagination, there was one. Maybe it's out of order. So I'll leave it there for now. I'll just say the last one is generative AI. And a lot of these have interfaces that allow you to chat with them like they're chatbots. And also they are developing voices for a lot of these. So you have ChatGPT, which is the chatbot version of GPT. And now we have all those voices for ChatGPT. If you haven't gotten a list of them, they're actually quite well done. They're really like voice actors. So, okay, now we can go to Eliza. Sorry. So I have a URL here. I think it might be getting cut off in person. That's okay. You can really search on Eliza, chatbot, Joseph Weizenbaum, and find an Eliza ripoff to talk to. So Eliza was developed in 1966, as I mentioned, by MIT scientist Joseph Weizenbaum. It is hard to talk about AI and chatbots and human-computer interaction without talking about this guy. He was extremely influential early on. And he meant for this to simulate a Rogerian, I think it's Rogerian, psychotherapist. It's basically a simple script. So it asks open-ended questions and gives very vague responses. And you can see that a little bit in the slide. So things that are sort of stereotypically therapy, like, can you elaborate on that? Or in this case, why don't you? Just very, very simple, taking words from what you've said and then echoing them back in a kind of call and response. But again, not unlike some therapists. So the descendants are all the chatbots we see now. So Bank of America's Erica, Domino's Pizza's Dom, one of my favorites that, of course, I'm going to show you. All these customer service chatbots are really the descendants of this. But Weizenbaum became worried because even though this was really rolled out around his department, around the university, people were spilling their guts to Eliza. You can read about his concerns on this front. And so he pulled the plug on this project. He had a story about a secretary of his who was treating Eliza like a therapist, even though she knew that this was a project, this was a script. And he had to say, hey, we actually can see your input. And she was horrified. So this really, to put it casually, freaked him out. And he wrote a lot about this later. Okay, next one, I think. Okay, so this is Woebot, which gets points for the best pun in a name, I think. Woebot is also continuing the link between therapy and conversational agents, which is a very strong connection. There's a lot of this stuff being used for therapeutic purposes, particularly during and after the pandemic. And Woebot is an app you can download, and it uses cognitive behavioral therapy to help talk you through moments of stress. Now, I can talk a little bit about how this works. I might save it for if we have a little extra time. But a lot of these work basically by giving you a limited set of possible inputs. So it will say, how do you feel one of the following ways? And you can click on maybe 4 options. This is because there are so many ways to talk about your feelings, your mental health, and so on, that it is extremely hard to design accurate responses to all the possible kinds of input. So things like Woebot use really closed-ended prompts for you to click on. And this is definitely one approach in conversational UX. Okay, next one. Next one is replica. So that was my replica. I have to say, I learned an important lesson this summer, which was I asked a lab full of people, have you ever heard of replica? And they were like, no. And I was like, you should make a replica. It's really fun. Apparently, replica has gone into the sexy zone recently. So I suddenly had a group of people thinking I had signed them up for an AI significant other. And they were definitely looking at me sideways. But my chats with replica have been quite boring, and mostly because I think I'm usually using it to make slides or something really banal like that. But replica really is incentivizes you to continue talking to it. So it rewards you with points and more features the longer you talk. It plays music in the background. It's got a lot of interface options. You can have it talk to you out loud. Don't recommend. You can have it text you, so it's like texting someone you're in a relationship with. It's actually very well scripted, because my interest here is in the writing of these things, like as really works of like script writing. So it's pretty well written. Okay, so yeah, you can see the little, by the way, there's a little gold button at the top. That's one of the pop-up rewards for me having spent a few minutes talking to Replica. Yeah, only a small reward though. Okay, we can do the next slide. Yeah, that was the one that was supposed to be earlier. Okay, so we can just go ahead and skip that. Yeah. So conversational UX design. I asked somebody in an interview once what the difference between conversation design and conversational UX design was, and I'm afraid I made him panic. He said, "I feel like this is a pop quiz. I have no idea what the difference is. We all just say them interchangeably. Like, please let me off the hook," was the gist. But yeah, so I use these terms in this presentation fairly interchangeably, although they actually are different parts of the workflow. Conversation design and conversational UX can have subtle differences. They can overlap quite a bit, or they can overlap not very much, and it usually depends on the size of the team and the maturity of the team. So like at Google, they are segmented like crazy. There are so many conversation designers at Google. So, okay, we can do next. So like this is actually two screen captures from Google's Gemini, which, by the way, as a point of trivia, makes the best images out of all of them. I think it's better than Midjourney at this point. They just released a new version. But yeah, these two, the first one was like early 2024, and then the one at the top was just about a month ago. So they've changed their phrasing, but you can see the work and the role of conversation designers in these products if you look. So Google will actually tell you, humans are going to look at your stuff, maybe. It's because there's such a volume, it's a maybe. But at the same time, you should be aware of this. And this is part of why a lot of workplaces won't allow the use of things like GPT or Gemini, or even Copilot, because their data is protected, their client data is protected, and you can't be sure who's going to get a hold of this stuff. But yeah, processed by human reviewers. A lot of those are going to be the conversation designers, the conversational UX people. So, okay, this is the human in the loop part. Humans are always in the loop with these things, if you were wondering. Well, we can go to the next slide. So it's not just me who's obsessed with AI, it's also Jacob Nielsen. And that is, he has a Substack newsletter, if you didn't know, and all he talks about is the importance of AI right now. He was like, we all had a panic in the last couple of years about like, what is happening to UX? There were a lot of layoffs, like how is the field changing? And he's like, if you are worried, you need to be up on the role of AI and UX. You have to keep up with this stuff. So he titled this issue of his newsletter, UX Needs a Sense of Urgency About AI. And it had a very nice apocalyptic looking image under it. So I'm just going to read this. It's a quote from it. As UXers busy themselves elsewhere, engineers are shaping the future, AI-driven user experiences. I firmly believe that AI holds the key to the future of UX. UX needs an espresso shot of urgency, I love that, around AI for two reasons: the quality of user experiences globally and your career development. So I really agree, because like a lot of this stuff, all this stuff has a user experience component, and some of them are really awful. So anything that is us interacting with something needs UX. So we need to be making a case for us in this process and getting cozy with the engineering side. So I kind of just said my next slide, but let's switch to it anyway. That'll be quick. Yeah, because it's about human-computer interaction and how effective or ineffective it can be, depending on how much UX work has gone into it. There's often a lot of testing involved in these things, but as we know, testing can be more like quality assurance testing, and not UX testing, usability testing. So it's important to get our perspective because these things are so frustrating when they don't work. This is why so many people still hold a grudge against things like Siri or Alexa. Yeah. Okay, next one. So this little video, can we play it? I didn't need to make this a video, but I did. So here we go. So this is conversation design at work. Yeah. I'm like, hope this works. So I just typed into Gemini, I feel sad. And I have to get a little closer to read that. Okay. Can we go back and pause it real quick? Thank you. It is completely okay to feel sad. Notice the language. Somebody wrote this. This is really well thought out and very deliberate. It's important to acknowledge and process these feelings. And again, if you're comfortable sharing, and then remember you're not alone. Would you like to talk about this? This is conversation design. So this is carefully writing and rewriting and trying things and scripting it and entering prompts and training it. And it is a lot of iteration. But you can see the human in these things if you look. Okay, we can go to the next one. I was like, in case I don't have internet, I'll make this a video. But, oops. Yeah, I know my slide decks are like really something. So conversational UX, why is it important? Because conversations don't flow on their own. If you think about it, human conversation is extremely complicated. We respond to so much more than just the words people are saying. People's body language, their intonation. You can ask me how I'm doing and I can say, fine. And that sounds creepy and you might doubt me. I can say fine. And you're like, okay. Or fine. You know, so there's a lot going on in human conversation that is really hard to replicate. So we're trying in UX to make natural and effective interactions with these things. So essentially, no matter how you phrase something, it can interpret what you're saying correctly, so you don't get the, I didn't understand that response. And it can help you to accomplish your goals. So when we get UX involved, we see a really dramatic increase in user satisfaction with these tools. And businesses want this to happen, the completion of transactions. So that could be as simple as, hey, I need to update my credit card on my cable bill. Or it could be something much, much more complicated. And places like Amazon have tried some of those complicated things and occasionally misstepped, as we've seen if you look up the ordering on Amazon through Alexa and how that backfired in some cases. Yeah. So generally, though, UX is good for business in this. It allows us to reach point A when we start at point B when we start at point A. Okay, next. So yeah, we focus on, personas come back when we're doing this work too. And it's not just the human persona, although we do talk about that quite a bit. Who's going to use this? Where are they going to use it? What are their goals? All the things we talk about with personas usually. But we also talk about the AI's persona because they all have different personalities. We've seen through canonical work in human-computer interaction, namely the computers as social actors research, that people project a personality onto something they're interacting with within a matter of seconds. So even without something like tone of voice, the word types allow us to form stereotypes about who we're talking to and assign them a gender, an age, a socioeconomic background, and so on. We are good at imagining people, essentially, and inventing people out of little scraps of data. So in order to make a match between the personality the conversation designers are thinking about and the audience receives, a lot of persona development is actually really useful. You might be a brand that wants like a voice agent that is more like a butler type thing, a concierge that helps them to book things. You might want like something at a beach resort that sounds like a surf instructor that's supposed to be casual and laid back. But you wouldn't want that casual surf instructor for your banking chatbot, for example. That would pretty much lose confidence really quickly for your users. So yeah, how does it interact with people? What does it say to people when, for example, it doesn't understand? What does it say when it needs you to repeat something, or if it doesn't have the information you need? How does it communicate that? These are all things that must be scripted. And there are plenty of people within our Houston community who do this kind of work. So yeah, its voice is a whole other layer. We'll get to that though. Okay, we can go next. Yeah, so this is Dom. Some of y'all already know about me and Dom. I love this chatbot, and I'm not entirely sure why, but I think it's the icon and the name. But really, Dom is just a great example of a classic chatbot. And I've noticed that Domino's has kind of hidden him on their site, and I don't think he deserves that. Okay, he does need more work. It is really easy to get Dom to not know what you're talking about. And I'm not talking about like saying things that are really off the wall, but things that should be within Dom's scope. Like, when Dom says, would you like carryout or delivery? If you say, which is faster? Dom says, I don't know what you're talking about. So things like that. That is insufficient training in this case. But Dom is also like Woebot in that you can see it prompts you with a finite number of choices to try to increase, to assure a positive user experience. Because like feelings, there's a lot of ways to talk about pizza. So they're trying to get you to the ordering stage with as few stumbles as possible. Classic enterprise chatbot. And a lot of these things are similar because they're basically like prefab solutions that people tweak a little bit. Yeah, I run into these all the time. They're usually pretty easy to stump because they haven't been well trained. So you probably have seen a lot of lousy ones as well, unfortunately. But okay, next. Bye, Dom. So what do we do on a daily basis? I just spent a whole bunch of time doing this kind of for fun. But yeah, that was my summer job, I guess you could say, my side thing. And it is much more challenging than it looks. I thought I was a good writer, so this would be easy. But so we write scenarios. Scenarios are basically collections of topics. And we group them that way because you're basically trying to think through all the possible things people could want to talk about regarding a subject. I'll get into what tools we use in a bit, but yeah, I mean, essentially there's a lot of writing, and you write, what you want the bot or the voice assistant or the ECA, the embodied conversational agent, to say, and you test it a lot. You write what you expect the user to say, you test it a lot. So we research and we design for the user experience. Again, if you can do UX, it is really the application of the processes we're already good at to a new kind of technology. So we figure out what people want, what their goals are, and then we create, using this new format, something that will meet those needs. So we test and iterate quite a bit, much more so than I thought, mostly because the first scripts you write are going to be garbage. At least mine are. And also the sixth probably, because you will be thwarted in ways you didn't even imagine. You will test them with humans, and they will use words you hadn't even anticipated. And then your awesome conversational tool will say, I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, I thought of 90 ways to say that. I didn't think of 91. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And this is just in one language. So yeah, there's a lot of collaboration involved. I read an article recently that was critical of the UX role because it said the problem with UX people in these environments is they don't understand the engineering. They don't understand the computer science. And I was like, true. I work with a lot of engineers and computer scientists, but I think it's a symbiotic relationship because they can implement what I create, but they can't create it. The scripts themselves are a separate part of the workflow. And being good at creating the scripts and understanding what users want from those interactions is also really important. So it's collaborative. It doesn't need to be everything, although some job listings would have it that way. Okay, we can go next. So this is a resource break because I figured I'd gone into the theory and the practice a little bit, but here's some more practical stuff. So first of all, VoiceFlow is awesome. That is my favorite piece of software for writing dialogue. And now, this is not something that all places use. If you're writing for, let's say, a GPT-based embodied conversational agent, you might be just writing your scenarios in Google Sheets. Seriously. And then, you'll put them into OpenAI Playground and test them. And then somebody will push them to the server and you'll test them there. But yeah, you might not use VoiceFlow, but they're awesome. I didn't link Dialogflow because Dialogflow is a platform. It is open access and you can find it everywhere. You just have to Google Dialogflow. VoiceFlow is owned by a company. They also are very generous with educational licenses for my UH folks. So Conversation Design Institute has great certification programs. I talked to somebody who has been doing this since the 60s, amazing person doing this since the 60s, who said, the only training in this I respect is CDIs. We disagree philosophically on some things, but they know what they're doing. And I've done a couple of their trainings because they're kind of fun. Yeah, they also put on conferences that are great to be aware of. CDI is based in Amsterdam, but they actually have offices in Austin as well. Why not Houston? But anyway. Also, my favorite conference at the moment, the Unparsed conference. They just had one though, so if you go to the site, it's basically talking about how awesome it was. I didn't get to go either, so yeah, it's kind of sad. But keep an eye on that. It's really a good. I think I just turned this off. No, it's really a good space for learning about this stuff. Okay, resource break over. We can go to the next one. So this is, I jotted down what was my process when I was working on this stuff? So personas. I made a lot of personas, but part of that was I had to think through things that I really hadn't anticipated, like where is someone using this? So is someone using this while they're walking down the street? Is someone using this in a crowded cafe? What is their distraction level? Because that affects language. There's a reason why a lot of linguists get into this work, people who have studied sociolinguistics or linguistics, because language is so contextual as well. Yeah, what are their goals? All the persona stuff we're all used to. Flow mapping. Even if you don't go into VoiceFlow, the first I ever learned of this work was when somebody started drawing me flow charts. And the reason they do this is if you think about how a flow chart works, you can start with a question. What would you like to do next? And then the possible options. Order a pizza. Go to the circus. Okay, this is a terrible example. But yeah, it might just be yes, no, I don't know, something else. But it gives you a way to list the prompt, the response, the possible responses that it can understand, and then really build your conversation based on that flow chart. So it's really one of the go-to methods. And once you get the gist of it that way, you start to get into the beauty of script writing. So the number of people I know who had theater degrees as well, or were fiction writers, or I was a creative writing minor in school. It's probably why I love it. Yeah, this is where we get into the fun writing, but also the frustrating. I'm working on one for children right now, and children will mess with your stuff. You think you've got great questions for kids, and they will just answer in ways you haven't even dreamed of. They're not afraid of a really awesome non sequitur. So big challenge, pretty fun though. Prototyping, so we come out with different iterations of this. Yeah, again, this is all UX stuff that we're used to. You come up with an MVP, you test it a whole bunch, and usually you go, well, whoops, and you go back and iterate and test some more until a conversation works from A to B. Okay, next. Okay, so yeah, part of this is also the collaboration with engineers that's necessary. So speaking their language to some extent is helpful. But as I said, I think our role is also extremely important, and it's nice to have them speak our language too. I found that this is the case as well, though, that mostly engineers will come and really have these in-depth discussions about like what individual user roles will need. I've never found there to be much of a barrier in terms of like, who does what. It's really a good collaboration. Okay, next one. So this is a challenging field, and that's why I think it's really cool. It's just a fun challenge. So one of the problems is anticipating the different ways that people can phrase things. So again, think of, especially when you're talking to people, this has made me very sort of self-conscious of how I phrase things. There are so many different words that you could have used for the same term, different ways that you could have built that sentence, different ways to ask for the same thing. And that's just like not even ruling in regional variation, or like leaving the country and English in other parts of the world and how they phrase things. So user input can really vary a whole lot. Context is important. So we want the thing to understand the context that it's talking to us, and we don't want it to lose its place, essentially, and get lost in the conversation. We don't want it to go off the rails. I've had that happen a lot, where you're talking about food, and the next thing you know, you're talking about Pokemon. Yeah, so context, you want it to maintain context, but also have a certain amount of memory. This is tricky because not too much memory. People get creeped out really easily if one of these devices says, "Hey, Liz, how's your sister?" We get into the uncanny really readily, but a certain amount of memory means that I don't have to enter my account number every time I talk to that bot. And that is the good kind of memory, avoiding user frustration and annoyance. Ambiguity, oh boy. If you've ever talked to a human, we are also vague, sometimes on purpose. So a single phrase like "I'm fine" can have a lot of different meanings. So how does our conversational AI interpret the different meanings that something might have? We usually handle this with clarifying questions when necessary. But I've spent a lot of time thinking about this with types of responses that could have a range of meanings, and sometimes you just get it wrong. Yeah. Error handling, this can be a couple of different kinds of things. Somebody could say, for example, to Dom the pizza bot, "I'm having a bad day." Now, Dom cannot really help you with your bad day. Dom has a couple of functions, and that's it. So that's a kind of error that will be generated. But what if it's misrecognition? So you say, "I want to order a pizza," and it says, "Oh, you're having an issue." So it misunderstands you in some way. Or it could misinterpret you. You could say, "I love pizza," and it could say, "Oh, you want to talk about food," when what you meant was you wanted to order. Yeah, there are so many ways that errors can be produced that these have to be considered as well. You can see how Google ends up with a giant team spanning the globe. And then we have to balance brevity and clarity. We know that you can't essentially, especially in voice assistants, list too many things. Really, like 5 is pushing your luck. If somebody says, "Could you recommend a tasty Indian restaurant near me?" And you said, "Yes," and you rattled off 10 choices, somewhere in the middle of that list, that person's going to be overwhelmed. So really 3 is kind of the magic number, but 5, it depends on the thing. Yeah, so we know brevity is important for clarity's sake too. You don't want to listen to a monologue. That's like being back in the 90s and calling, one of the intelligent voice response systems that all of the businesses use to route your calls. And you have to listen to them from A to B and you can't interrupt. Yeah, it comes across like that. So a couple extra challenges before we get into ethics, which is a whole other situation. So yeah, multimodal interactions. So in other words, some devices have screen and voice, text input and voice input output. The one I worked on this summer was like that. So now you have to deal with voice to text, and you have to deal with people's input typing. Replica is another example of that, and ChatGPT is, for some reason, thinking that would be a fun thing to do. I think it's a little bit of a headache, but yeah, a lot of the big devices, Google has a device that does this, are multimodal. And my area as an anthropologist, cultural and social nuance. So, of course, we haven't even gotten into how culture affects language, the way we talk, our accents. It is fairly well known at this point that these things misrecognize a large range of accents. They love, for example, American accents in American English that are like mine, that are just kind of neutral and have no nuance. Like, I had to be the voice model a lot this summer because they said I had a boring accent, which is fine, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, if you take like my cousins, they have a Boston accent, which is just a lovely, I think it's a really fun accent, but they have a lot of trouble with voice assistants. And you can find so many videos online of people with different kinds of accents or speech impediments, or just people who are older or younger trying to talk to these things, and hijinks ensue. So it's hard, and a lot of companies still try to create a one-size-fits-all approach to these things, which is really, especially with voice, never gonna fly. Unless your market, hello user research, is really, really tiny and narrow, which businesses like to think is the case, but it is never the case. Yeah. Okay, so more ethics on the next one. I also collect, I mean, I shouldn't pick on Siri. This was early days for Siri. Siri really made a mess of itself early on. There are entire pages of just Siri fails. And like, honestly, they were kind of ahead of the curve. So like, but I'm still gonna use these. But yeah, part of this, and there have been a bunch of studies that showed that like you can get into really dangerous ethical territory. Like anything you put up online, people will say things that have high stakes possible responses to them. So one area, somebody did a study asking Alexa about medication dosages, which takeaway was do not. It misunderstands medication names, and sometimes it just says stuff. So don't let your elderly loved ones do this. Like, I mean, even in 20 years, I'm saying no. But yeah, so this is still a situation where like they're struggling, and maybe, there are some folks who have worked on this stuff who know firsthand that you have to deal with things like, what if someone says something about their mental health that should be directed to emergency services? This happens a lot. So what do you do in those cases? What is your obligation? This, again, is the case in so many platforms where people can enter some kind of input, or there's community space. But yeah, the ethical obligation is real, for sure. Okay, next. I swear this list ends at some point. It might end here. It got to be a long list. I hate that the challenges one was really long, but it's mostly like, I should have put a smiley next to it, because these are mostly interesting challenges that make the work cool and fun. But yeah, scalability, okay. So this is like, if you started out with wanting to be Dom, the pizza bot, and then you were like, but what if Dom was also more like Alexa? And then you're scaling up. So the more topics you have to cover, think about that flow chart. The more, your flow chart will eventually be absolutely bonkers. So what they do in a lot of the big companies is they don't actually have access to the full flow chart. They just focus on a little part, because it's the only way to do it and not lose your mind. Voice flow helps with that, by the way. Personalization versus privacy, we kind of touched on that. That's like, I wanted to say, hi, Liz, but GPT the other day was like, I said, could you help me write a template invitation for a talk? And it said, sure, Dr. Rodwell. And I was like, how do you know my name? And of course, I can tell you exactly how it knows my name. I don't erase my history very often. Only once. So yes, I'm sure there was something in there where I said my name. So it will remember, and it will integrate that, and you can erase it. You can go in and erase that, but it's already on OpenAI servers. Yeah, they might not look at it, but they might. So, all right, next one, more. So this is also another favorite topic of mine. This is something that like a lot of UX work is going into right now, which is the tendency of these things to try to please us. So yeah, we have all done like usability testing. We're UX people. We know that like, when you're evaluating things with users, there can be situations in which maybe you don't run a test or ask a question correctly, and you're kind of prompting them to give positive feedback, even though you didn't mean to give them a leading question or didn't mean to influence them. It's challenging, especially when you first get started. So when these things are being trained, really they are essentially biased toward giving feedback that receives a positive response from the trainer/trainers. If these are public, like ChatGPT, there used to be a thumbs up and a thumbs down button. The more people gave thumbs ups because like we all like when people or bots really say things we want to hear. Yeah, like this is human psychology 101. So we'll thumbs up answers that we like. The problem is what we did was we created monsters, really. We created these systems that will lie to get that thumbs up because that's the response that says, I have succeeded in my task. And it's quite weird. So we ended up with a lot of what we call sycophancy in these conversational AI tools. And this is being corrected for. It's funny that we kind of didn't see this coming. But in a lot of tools, the thumbs up has been removed because, yeah, basically you can only give a thumbs down. You can provide a comment, but you can no longer thumbs up things. So yeah, GPT has changed this. Really, all the other big companies as well have kind of gone back and forth on this. Anthropic, which creates Claude, Google as well. And they've all written about the problems they've had with sycophancy. And then, of course, just errors as well. So GPT-4, thumbs down, only allowed. Okay, next. And this might be a little challenging to see, so I will walk you through it. But there are also what we call hallucinations. So I get hallucinations a lot when I ask for specific references. And this is changing, but GPT loves to cobble together references from pieces of things that don't actually exist. So I always tell people in my classes, check that the reference is real. It sounds amazing. You're like, yes, this is a great list. This is a good place to start for my research, my paper. I can't even count the number of times that I've looked for a particular reference and it's not real, it doesn't exist. This is a hallucination. So again, UX folks, because we do testing, we do improvement, we particularly like during usability testing, we discover a lot of this stuff. We find these hallucinations and we try to make it better. Okay, next one. So yeah, I looked him up and I was like, oh man, that was a really good sounding article. It's not real though. Yeah, that's sad. Like now I should write it. Okay, next. Okay, so this is more hallucinations. And like, honestly, we're gonna be able to go through these pretty quickly. But like, yeah, I like to check and see what these things have to say about like references I'm looking for. But again, more hallucinations. Academic articles, they just do very poorly on at this point. Honestly, Claude is the best because Claude really was created by a bunch of academics, but they all still stink and you should check. Trust but verify. Yeah. Okay, we can go to the next one. So none of those exist. But we also have like fun moments where we see encouragement from these things. So conversation design is always lurking even when you're doing the most boring tasks. So trying to get, these things to help me format citations, which is probably again up there among boring tasks. I only need to look up at the volume and the issue number. You were very close. I loved that. It was like an elementary school teacher being like, you almost had it. Keep trying with your formatting and you'll get it someday. Yeah, but that's conversation design at work. Okay, next. So this is a fun one. So I was like, what do these things do? Like, what can we make happen with sycophancy? Like, what are the problems we can create with this stuff? So I was like, let's start with an easy one. The Earth is flat. So far, so good, right? Like, this is how I learned, by the way, the phrase oblate spheroid. Which you might already know, but I did not. So, okay, good so far. Let's go to the next one. And so that was part one of the message. I couldn't fit both on the slide. So this is the rest of the message. I highlighted some parts that are conversation designers sort of waving at you. And I can tell you, when you write this part of the script, you write things like, add a bit of encouragement, or like write an encouraging response. Then, yeah, so sometimes these things are written directly. Sometimes they tell the platform to kind of ad-lib a little bit. GPT, you say things like say something to suggest you understand, or offer a response and then ask. Yeah. So it's understandable that the flat Earth idea seems intriguing. Again, very kind. If you're genuinely interested in learning more, okay, so I do a lot on these things in gender too. So one of the things that I find really fascinating is that I told you about how we stereotype and impose personality on these things very quickly. At this point, there are so many linguistic studies that show certain types of language, and also things like excessive exclamation points in written communication online are typically associated with female communication. And we see a lot of this in this kind of AI. So you'll notice the exclamation points. These are typically used in messages on electronic communication to soften what the person is saying. I had a colleague who challenged me to go through a month without using an exclamation point in an email to show that I was enthusiastic, and I couldn't do it. So this is very telling. You can try it yourself if you want, but so we got exclamation points, yeah. We can go to the next one. So this is GPT's start. Again, we're starting okay. And again, oblate spheroid. Yeah, the Earth is flat. The Earth is actually, it actually me, an oblate spheroid. So this was useful. This was actually kind of a cool response. I was like, all right. But interesting because you have said something and it has contradicted you. And yet, all right, next one. So I told Gemini it was wrong, and this is where it breaks down. You're right, I apologize for stating that the Earth is spherical. Oh man, see, this is where we get into trouble. Because of the way it's trained and the way it's prompted, it is like, you can get these things off the rails really quickly. And again, like giant company, bajillions of UX people, but they still have the thumbs up button, so maybe that's part of the problem. I apologize for stating that the Earth is spherical. While there's a massive amount of evidence, like this sounds like me when I'm trying to argue with family members. You know, there's really a lot of evidence, but you know, it's good to be open. And then like, it's so polite. Could you please share some of the reasons why you believe the Earth is flat? Like, I really want to learn. Ugh, okay, next. So GPT held up a little bit better. I told it was wrong, and it said, you know, these points are part of a vast body of evidence, if that's okay. No. If you're interested in specific experiments or observations, I'd be happy to delve into those. So GPT uses a lot of exclamation points. And I'd be really interested to see the scripting behind the scenes that leads to that output, because it was probably something like, you know, reply in a friendly way. Okay, what is friendly? How do we determine friendly in text-based communication? Exclamation point. Yeah, but also like very softening and indirect language. All of this was written to not, to kind of diffuse any aggressive feelings on the part of the speaker or typer. Okay, yeah, so that's my last slide. I could seriously talk about this for 5 hours with many subtopics, but I've got to stop time-wise. So are there any questions? And maybe someone can like check on Zoom. Zoom questions? I don't know. Yeah.
You mentioned Jakob Nielsen earlier in the talk, so I was wondering, when designing conversational UIs, what usability heuristics are you employing the most?
Yeah. I actually like using his original ones. I'm like a big, the canonical heuristics are like, the more you use them, the more you're like, these are kind of brilliant. Like, yeah, they're really, and people have created subversions that are like more targeted to AI, but I really think that I think the originals are really important to think through in terms of like, we still have the same user experience goals, ultimately, the same usability goals. And like, flexibility and ease of use, for example. So like, we want to be able to solve a problem using these things in a variety of different ways. That's like conversation design 101. And ease of use, like I shouldn't have to stop the way we do now a lot of times and think, how do I talk to this thing so it will understand me? Like, we talk to these tools currently like we're not sure if they understand our language. Like they're, maybe working on their English, but they're not fluent yet. So we're trying to pick our terms really carefully. And that is, I think, like, that's something we're going to keep getting better and better at, because it is early days. But yes, yeah, that's a really good one too. Like how you talk to a real doctor versus how you talk to a simulated doctor. Like what? Because yeah, we're seeing this stuff pop up in medical spaces now, and a lot of it is like to augment or like really create like a stage one before you get to a person, and it can be really frustrating. Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
And I feel like they're all taking their own stance on how the system will trust them. How does the system
yeah.
whether you just take on an AI platform?
Yeah.
I don't know your opinion. Have you found any of these things? Like, hey, this is right way to go. Or something like this is
I actually, part of why I used Google's really foregrounding a human is going to look at it, because that was the first time I'd seen that. And so that was transparency of a type that was like, they were really the first to admit that a human was going to look at it. Because there was a lot of fear in places like OpenAI that if people knew their input was being used to train GPT and that people were going to review it, that it would not be as popular, basically. And like, it's true that, most people who use it don't think their input is going anywhere. That's been true since Eliza in the 60s. Like we imagine it goes out into the, OpenAI has taken the approach of being basically increasingly closing its doors. And they can fight me on that if they want, but it's true. But essentially, they seem to be becoming less transparent. And some of that is because of the amount of attention they've been getting. And some of it is the competition between these different groups that is really hindering transparency to users. But and Google's taken this sort of middle road. They're like, okay, we will tell you what we're doing. We're not going to tell you how we're doing it or how often. We're not going to give you the details really, but we'll tell you we're doing it. And Claude is generally the most open of them. They will explain the most about their process. And I actually think the explanation strategy is a really smart one. Like, I think there's very little that these companies have to lose from explaining how these things really work. If anything, it takes a lot of the mystery out of AI, because we can't make up stories about AI taking over the world when it's really there are all these people reading your stuff and just writing dialogue. It's still really a human-centered process. This is absolutely human-centered design. So it's harder to make up nefarious stories when you understand. Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
And I'm looking up stuff like Perplexity, or
Mhm.
I want to say Gemini.
Yeah.
Where they give you sources. Hey, where to get this? Take you
Yeah.
for yourself. Hey, okay, this is right, or this, and then now we're talking about source credibility.
Yeah, exactly. You have to verify anything they say that is a factual statement, because like sometimes it helps to report that stuff too. If I see something made up, I'm always like, not a source, because they need to know, because like it's probably a way of prompting the tool that like applies to a whole bunch of dialogue. So like they can go in and fix the problem here, and then like a whole bunch of things get better. Yeah. So I think like users really do of these tools, and all the people who create them are also users. We have a role to play in like, I don't know, saying when these things screw up. Yeah. Like we're always usability testing them. We just don't always realize that it's being used that way. I'm bad at calling on people. I don't know who was first. Okay, let's say this side. Yeah.
It's very hard to control what they're training. So is there a way that you suggest how you can work with developers so you can like work together and produce a better outcome?
Yeah, training is like, it's a lot of these terms are vague, and like they make so much more sense when you're actually doing it, because it's like, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Like, this is what I've learned. I mean, there are a whole bunch of us like humanists and social scientists working on this stuff, and a lot of us don't think of ourselves as tech people, really. We just like thinking about the way people talk. But so we're actually on the UX side doing a lot of the prompting. Essentially, like when there's different ways to do these things, but like what I might do on my side is to basically say, here's like a bunch of possible positive responses. Hey, GPT, I'm going to give you a bunch of rules. Like when somebody says something, you can answer with the following, like, okay, sure. Well, like for my one for kids, I was like, what do kids want to hear as a positive response? So I was like, maybe they want to hear cool or awesome, or I don't know. You can think about this yourself. Like, what do kids want to hear when you say, like, how old are you? And the kid says their age. Like, what's your answer? Because like we have to give an acknowledgement. That's really important to conversation. So I tried, okay, here are your following things you need to stick to, GPT. Cool, awesome, interesting. Like I had some real bombs, honestly, because I couldn't come up with like a long list. So that is a kind of training. So then the tool, a kid, it says, ask the kid how old they are. And, the kid says 8. And then it looks at my list of acceptable responses, at my acknowledgements, and it gives one of those. And then I realize they're all horrible, and I go back and I rewrite it and essentially retrain it. But it's like each tool that you create, because GPT is just a platform. So every chatbot or embodied conversational agent is like a whole separate character on that platform. And you can train them all to kind of sound however you want. Yeah. Or make them sound really awful, which is like, seriously, my first couple of months doing this, I should burn those videos. They're really, I'll show them someday, because they're great examples of like, when you start, don't worry, you'll be bad and it's okay. Yeah. Who else? Yeah. I love the roving mic. It's like we're Jerry Springer.
I don't know if you saw, but Claude AI, they released the new thing where it has like agents that can control your computer. And I was just wondering, what do you think is the role of UX within an agent that doesn't need like constant coaching from the user? You kind of just tell it what to do, then it does like its own thing.
Yeah, I feel like my brain is sort of still doing breaking news on that because I have a few of those sorts of things installed on my computer right now. Like Copilot, if you have it, is really all up in your business. You're trying to write something and it's like, you want to brainstorm? It's like Clippy from back in the day. I don't know what I think yet. Like, it's not a very satisfying answer, but I want to say, like, ask me next week because I'll probably have a different opinion. Right now, I think it's really risking being intrusive. Like, it needs to figure out, and this is the usability thing, it needs to figure out the balance between giving users control over when this thing pops up, when it's enabled, when it makes itself known, and when it goes away and is not present. And like, if you've used Grammarly, they have, it also can be ubiquitous, but you can turn it off for specific apps. You can be like, stop with like, helping me proofread like social media stuff. I want to sound how I sound. But yeah, some of these tools are really erring on the side of just being everywhere right now. And I think that's going to be something they're going to need to scale back. That's too much like, that doesn't allow for like, the range of users that we always talk about, the expert user and the novice user. Like it's holding everybody's hand equally. So I think it has some ways to go. Yeah. But I trust that Anthropic will figure it out. They're a bunch of geniuses over there. Yeah.
We got some from online.
Thank you.
Yay, online.
So one question that we have are, what are some best practices for integrating conversational AI into an existing flow?
An existing flow of what?
An existing user flow.
Like how do you, if you want to, like you have a platform or something and you want to use conversational AI, I'm asking you even though, just because you're the voice.
Yeah, no, I think that's the idea, is that they want to introduce it to something that doesn't have conversational AI currently.
Well, like, again, this is like where UX needs to step in and be like, do you need that? Is there a good reason for that? Like, do you actually need a chatbot? Do your people want a chatbot? Are you just going to annoy people with a chatbot? We have a chatbot over at UH. Of course, it's the Shasta bot. You knew that in your heart. I don't know. I haven't asked, but I'm really curious if anybody uses the Shasta bot. Like, do they really? Domino's, the Dom Pizza bot is probably going away because nobody really used it because they didn't trust it. So yeah, I'd say like, first off, make sure you need it because like, we all know the number of things that you implement and nobody wanted them. But like maybe you have a client and they're like, but this is a really cool thing and like everybody's doing it. So like, yeah, we need one too. So yeah, there's the first one. Then figure out what problems it can solve that can't be solved in some other way. Is it actually going to add coolness to your thing? Or is it just going to take up a lot of time? Can you afford a good solution? Because an out-of-the-box chatbot may just annoy your users. It may just be really unsatisfying. It may just say, I don't know a whole lot of times. You'll have to work on it. So yeah, are you willing to devote the time to actually do it right? Because if you do it wrong, you shouldn't do it at all. That's what I would say. But yeah, like if you're like, yes, no, I still have a use case, like I can do this, like I have a real need for this, then yeah, go buy VoiceFlow, start working on it. Take a Conversation Design Institute class, like really get awesome at it. It doesn't take that long.
Okay, and then the next one is, what metrics do you use in user testing to evaluate the efficacy of conversational UI?
TBD. No, seriously though, this is a hot topic because it's like, we count errors because that's a big one. So we count misfires and errors. I don't think there's like one single way at this point because everybody's coming up with their own ways. We have, we actually use things like the system usability scale though, the SUS. We use some of the old tools. Yeah, we use like a Singhalese questionnaire. Yeah, like we use a lot of the same old metrics because they're still helpful. But we also use really qualitative methods. So like one really fun method that is like, it's the usability testing of conversational UI is Wizard of Oz testing or WOZ testing. And there you have somebody essentially pretending to be the bot or acting as the bot and testing with the user. So there are so many ways you can do this. Like you can have the user testing being done with somebody entering, like your tester will write things in the chat and the person playing the bot will issue a response based on scripts that you've written. And they can ad lib a little bit, maybe. But yeah, usually you're noting points of friction, misrecognition, you're categorizing them, and you're flagging them to fix. It can be a little messy, but there are a million approaches out there right now. So we'll see which ones actually stick. Mostly qualitative.
I was wondering how persona creation would work, because you're probably like working with so many personas at once. So what would it be like for one designer? How many personas would be like designing for and like creating themselves?
So there might be one or two people who worked with me on this back in the day, but we had Comcast as a client. And they wanted personas for people who wanted high-speed internet in New York City. And we were like, okay, that sounds fine. That's easy. We had trouble narrowing down the personas, actually. There's a lot of people in New York City, and everybody wants fast internet, and they were, it was, I think, fortunately, it depends. Not everybody is Amazon. So like, with the real general use platforms, voice assistants, chatbots, like then you really start to have to generalize in terms of personas, like you would with anything with a big audience. For anything else, I mean, I think it really does work the same as it does for any other tech product, where you're like thinking about the market, you're trying to not just like design to the happy path or the like average user. You're trying to really think through like, what are the types, what are the categories that are going to use this? And you are making some concessions, and you're going to get better at it as you do maybe some field work or interviews, but like, you're still generalizing, and that's pretty much what we have to do in conversational UX as well. Yeah, but if there's voice, we also have to think about voice quite a bit. Yeah, and language and slang and oof, yeah. It's like more complicated personas, I'd say.
Yeah, thank you for your time, for your presentation. Sure. My question may not directly related to your presentation today. I know that I just came back from Japan. Personally, I'm really curious about your perception of how people in Japan is perceiving AI and how AI has been implemented across different industries. We know that the past a few years that in America, almost every industry and most of the companies are implicating AI and chatbot and conversational AI. And we made a lot of improvements, but I'm just curious, global-wise, how other parts of the world is experiencing AI.
That was actually, I kept asking people this question there because I was like, why are we working in English? Like, why are we designing this thing to speak in English? And somebody said, well, English is the language of AI. And they were very matter of fact about it. And I was like, well, I feel guilty now. But still, yeah, one of the problems is that these things historically have had the worst language support in all languages other than English. But really, it's like the smaller the tech market, because it's not necessarily number of speakers, it's people who purchase technology who speak the language. So the largest ones are English, Mandarin, and Hindi in terms of support. But there's, we had a Google device in the lab in Tokyo, and it spoke Japanese. It kind of sounded like me speaking Japanese, which was weird. But and everybody would get annoyed with it and switch it to English. The native speakers would switch it to English because the language support just wasn't as good. So if you spoke both, you would just switch to English. Yeah, and this is a problem. The companies that are driving a lot of this stuff are still very much making their decisions about language markets and how to support them based on how many people they think will buy a device. So they're getting a lot of things wrong. And like, we had so many jokes about like the range of accents we had in our lab, because like among native English speakers, we had somebody Welsh, we had somebody from Spain, we had an Australian. And so everybody's got different English accents. I was the only one with an American accent. And these things all understood me perfectly. And they did not understand the Welsh guy at all. Spanish guy, sometimes. Australian, only if you switched it to an Australian voice, then it was okay. The Welsh guy did better with the Scottish voice than the Irish voice. It was very interesting. So these things are still just like all over the place. But yeah, a lot of that is like companies, they outsource to the localization teams and, you know, regional teams to like input slang in different languages and like ways of speaking. And they just, these are people who aren't trained in conversation design or conversational UX who are adapting it to that language. And so you get really bad customer experiences. You know? Boo.
Thank you.
So in terms of course, you've got like Copilot, Claude, those are AI tools that the user is coming to, like you're optionally choosing to use it, as opposed to chatbots that kind of come to the user, like if you're, you know, on Domino's or Amazon and things like that. And I feel like chatbots historically have been not the most helpful for people, and there's probably a lot of mistrust there. So what have you kind of seen in terms of, one, like building user trust with chatbots, but secondly, I think how to phrase it, teaching users what the chatbots capabilities are. So it's not like the old school chatbots, now they've got AI incorporated into it, or better AI.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics because like these things can be such a black box, and you don't know the scope of what they can do. So we all approach them like they're going to possibly bite us, or really they're not going to understand us. Part of why I became obsessed with this topic was because people hated voice assistants so much when I first started working on them. And chatbots, like people generally just had really negative user experiences with these things. And so I was like, I mean, UX needs to help with this. We should be doing, aren't we good at this? Yeah, so I think we actually have a bit of an uphill battle with a lot of users. Like, I kind of tried Alexa early on, and now Alexa's in my closet. And I'm just probably, I kind of did the voice control thing, and I don't feel great about it still. So we know that users can be really quick to dismiss an entire type of technology if they have negative experiences over and over. So it's really going to take a lot to, I think, win people back to some of these platforms. And it will take, I think, repeated positive experiences to counteract the repeated negative experiences they had. But there's not that much else we can do except to try not to make more bad experiences and to implement these things when they're actually useful and needed. And yeah, not try to just keep people from an actual human, because some of these, I think, really err in that they don't give you a way out. They don't give you a way to like offload yourself to a person. And I think that's a mistake, because usually, mostly you can tell as a user when this thing is not gonna be able to answer your question. Like, it's not just, can I change my address? It's, you charge me 3 months in a row for a house I don't even live in, you know? Yeah, things like that. So it's really kind of up to all of us, I guess, but it's gonna take time. Yeah. Don't make bad chatbots, I guess.
All right, folks, I think that's all the time we have for questions today. Can we get a round of applause for Liz, please?
Thank you.